Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com.
Welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight on Salem News Channel. In for the vacationing host, I'm Kevin McCullough. Welcome to a very busy hour. We've got a lot to get to straight ahead. It's hard tonight to understand who is the least favorite friend of one of our most important friends, the nation of Israel herself. She is by far our most consistent ally, particularly in the fight against Islamic jihadist terror. And yet, despite her loyalty to us, we seem to be most disloyal to her. Most specifically, follow the chain of events on this, President Biden is threatening to not give the exact weapons technology that would allow them to have the most precise, least civilian casualty type of attack against the remainder of Hamas possible. But because he has to win an election, he's willing to have Death to America chant for him and vote for him in Michigan and Minnesota, his two-state solution to try to become president again, versus standing with our ally and telling the terrorists, condemning them, saying, you have to stop, you surrender, you give up your weapons. If we were looking for a backbone from our president, the current one is not what we would be satisfied with. But it's a tough call. Is he a worse friend of Israel, or is American of Jewish heritage, Anthony Blinken? The reason I ask is because Blinken's had a pretty notorious week so far. May 13th is the Memorial Day that they have established to remember the victims of October 7th. That happened on yesterday. But the day before that, Anthony Blinken said on the news channels, Sunday morning news rounds, given the totality of what we've seen in terms of civilian suffering, in terms of children, women, men caught in this crossfire of Hamas's making who've been killed or injured, it's reasonable to assess that in a number of instances, Israel has not acted in a manner that's consistent with international humanitarian law. Thank you, Anthony Blinken, Mr. Expert in international humanitarian law. Oh, wait a second. He's saying that it's consistent with all of the numbers that have been reported that Israel probably didn't follow the law very well. Of course, all of this was started from terrorists who weren't following the law at all. But leave that aside for a second. According to an infographic published in the OCHA's daily report on May the 6th, all of a sudden the number of men and women and kids that have been killed in Gaza, though we've been told that the information ministry of Gaza is correct and their numbers must be believed, all of a sudden the number has seemed to be made sizably smaller in terms of what they are reporting as actual deaths. In fact, more than 50% of the reported deaths have now been nullified by the UN's department that watches such things. Now, what does that mean? It means that Gaza's been lying to us the whole time, and that their desire to stir up anti-Israel feeling in every corner of the globe is what motivated them to lie about the number of people that have been killed. In fact, it's nowhere near the number that they have claimed. But that didn't stop Anthony Blinken. No, Anthony Blinken, given the totality of what seems in terms of civilian suffering, in terms of children, women, men caught in this crossfire of Hamas's making who would have been killed or injured, it's reasonable to assess that in a number of instances, Israel has not acted in a manner that's inconsistent with international humanitarian law, even though the numbers are false. And now we know they're false because other people besides Israel are confirming that. Now, that's just one of the problems tonight that we have in trying to be a good friend to Israel. The fact that we have no backbone, that we are siding with the people that have accused them of atrocities, that would be one problem. But now we have the State Department trying to weigh in and tell us that, yes, as a matter of fact, that we shouldn't even have a war going on with Hamas. Jake Sullivan, national security advisor, Biden's national security advisor, insisted on Monday that there must be a, quote, political solution to the end of the war, sparked by Hamas on October 7th. The massacre, of course, saw Hamas and other Iranian-backed terrorists invade Israel by land and air. But they're not allowed to point that out or to make it plainly obvious to all of those that are watching. In fact, they're supposed to just take the punishment, smile, say thank you, and go about their business. That's what the protesters on the campuses of American colleges would like to see happen, because those idiots don't know anything more than maybe the UNOCHA knew when they were reporting the false numbers. The truth is, Israel has gone to great lengths to protect innocent civilians where it can. It drops pamphlets in areas it's going to bomb and says, we're going to bomb, don't stay here. It goes in, and when it finds casualties of Palestinian making, it goes in and gets them the medical care that they need. In fact, you've seen repeatedly the IDF's medical teams treating Palestinians, injured Palestinians, sometimes injured terrorists, right alongside injured IDF fighters. That's not an uncommon sight in the medical hospitals and the medical tents for the Israeli Defense Forces. Nevertheless, Jake Sullivan is insisting that military pressure is necessary but not sufficient to fully defeat Hamas. If Israel's military efforts are not accompanied by a political plan for the future of Gaza and the Palestinian people, the terrorists will keep coming back and Israel will remain under threat. I have a little note for National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Hey, listen to this. These people have promised, as long as they have air in their lungs, they will come, reconstitute, and try to kill Israel nonstop. So what would hold them back? Well, a couple of things, most importantly. One, Israel getting rid of the rest of the Hamas remnants that are in Gaza. But secondly, an America that would be strong in standing with Israel. See, if we drop our guard and we say to them, we're not going to support Israel anymore, like maybe not send them the technical weapons that they could use to help kill Hamas and get rid of them for good, the scourge that they are, then they may say, hey, we're winning the world thought on this. And they may actually convince other countries to go along with us and not stand with Israel either. It's a very difficult challenge to Israel to lose its most important ally, its most important friend. And I'm hoping that the world does not turn into a cataclysmic storm before November 5th. I'm hoping that President Trump will seek to assure Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli people that we will be there when they need us, as we need to be when they are there for us. Having said all of that, that's a look at a good old swath of American Democratic Party politics, particularly as it relates to Israel and Hamas and what cowards they truly are. I'm Kevin McCullough, coming back from New York.
Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's Jenna, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. I am obviously not the aforementioned Jenna Ellis. Kevin McCullough, my name, from the Salem News Channel news desk in New York. Happy to fill in and hope that Jenna is enjoying her week off. Lots of fun guest hosts this week, so check it out. My next two guests were scheduled to talk about really all things that are related to the what we would call story A in the news cycle. which is Donald Trump. It doesn't really move off the story A position of your local newspaper, your nightly television feed. And that's a reminder of just how big the days in which we are living in relate to not only what he wants to do, but what he is doing in terms of the campaign for presidency in 2024. We're going to talk about his trials. We're going to talk about polls. And here to join me is Will Chamberlain, who's counsel at the Article 3 Project, and Brent Buchanan, who's a GOP pollster and messaging strategist. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the breaking news from today. And Brent, I'll start with you. There's new battleground polls that show Trump up 5 across several of them. And these are, if we follow the map of 2020, and I have a whole theory about how that map might be thrown out, and we're going to look at a different configuration. But let's just say we have 2020 to go off of. These 5 states with that size lead would give Trump the presidency over Biden if it were held today, right?
Definitely. And it's kind of divided into 2 buckets of states: the Sun Belt states, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, and then the Rust Belt states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And you're exactly right. All of them are definitely more Republican now for Trump than they were in 2020. But also got to look at 2020 as almost an anomaly. And if you go look at the political trajectories of these states, this feels much more in line with that, say 10, 20-year trajectory of each state's partisanship than the 2020 election did.
Well, let's just put it kindly. There were a lot of goofy things about 2020 that still don't make sense to people like me. But let's drill down on this a little bit, because the battleground states in 2020 at this time out, what's comparison? What was Biden ahead, or was it a 1 to 2 point race, neck and neck? I mean, five points up on average per state. You're starting to go beyond, some of the margins of errors in some of these polls.
You're exactly right. And we were actually Trump's pollster in 2020. So we did everything from Labor Day through Election Day for him in 12 states and 2 congressional districts. So have a deep knowledge of what these states look like, at least in the fall of 2020. And I would say let's keep that in mind too. Like, we're a long ways away. We're a political eternity away from the election still. But comparatively, the Sun Belt and the Rust Belt states were all much closer within the margin of error every single week we polled it back in 2020. And so one big takeaway, not just from 2020, but probably more from 22, when the red wave became a red trickle, is that we've got to pay attention to ballot share, not just margin. And when you look at the Sun Belt states within the polls that you're talking about here, Trump is at or above 50% ballot share, which is just wild to see. Yeah,
well, the other side has kind of done it to themselves. Will Chamberlain is with the Article 3 Project, and that's a good foray into President Trump's out attracting 100,000 people at Wildwood over the weekend, and Joe Biden is cavorting with Mr. Cohen to get someone to say something naughty about Mr. Trump in a courtroom that is as much of a kangaroo proceeding as any I've seen in New York in quite some time. This is having some sort of negative effect, but mostly on the substance, that the fact that this trial is going so poorly for those that are bringing it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think the trial is helping the Democrats at all. When Trump does campaign, he's still able to bring out a huge number of people. And if anything, it's creating an environment where he just looks persecuted, and he's got a lot of surrogates out there pushing for him and pushing for his message. I mean, you saw today at Mike Johnson, yesterday at J.D. Vance and Tommy Tuberville. He's got a lot of people speaking for him. And so I don't think it's hurting him politically. That said, it is obviously a travesty of justice. I mean, I think the single most despicable person in all of the nonsense, starting with Russiagate, but going through all the impeachments and now this Stormy Daniels stuff, the most despicable person in the entire affair is Michael Cohen, because he was President Trump's lawyer, and he's currently on the stand testifying against his former client. He recorded his former client and published those recordings. And he's now raising money off of the opportunity to hurt his former client. And as a lawyer myself, it's just an unthinkable breach of legal ethics for him to do that.
Does it give you pause a little bit about I mean, have you ever had a half a second's notice to think, well, what if somebody that hired me did this, or wanted me to? It is a very surreal situation. I guess it's not comparable, but let me bring both of you in on this next part, because this is in essence what we're dealing with: the chicanery and nonsense, and campaigning nonstop on abortion. Pretty much is the White House ticket. And when you see what Trump is out there saying, he's talking about inflation, he's talking about the economy, he's talking about national security, he's talking about the border, he's talking about kitchen table issues that are impacting every single person. And Brent, I'm going to come back to you. We have a unique opportunity here to say, I remember what this guy did, and now I know what this guy did, and we really get to choose from very recent memory. This doesn't happen often.
Yeah, it's a really unique spot in that we have two incumbents running for the same seat. And we do a congressional battlegrounds poll, so we take the top 40 or so congressional seats in the country that are competitive and survey them every 2 months. And it's been fascinating to watch Donald Trump's recall of his job approval. So not what do you think about him now, but how do you approve of his job when he was president? And it is significantly better than people's current view of Biden's job approval within the battlegrounds where the race for the House is going to be decided. Many of those overlap within states where those states are going to be decisive in the presidential race. And that's really what Trump needs to do in this messaging, is talk about the things that matter to voters on a day-to-day basis, because most voters are not waking up thinking about all the nuances of many political issues. They just go check their bank balance and say, all right, I can't go to the grocery store till Friday. And
well
that's
said.
what
Let me get
Biden
a real quick question,
ignoring.
last one in for Will. We've only got about 10 seconds, Will, but the immunity case has not been decided by the Supreme Court. When do we expect it?
Probably end of June.
Okay. Well, we'll be standing by and watching for that. And gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight on Salem News Channel.
Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Again, Kevin McCullough filling in for Jenna Ellis. If you tuned in expecting to see her and you see me, I understand your disappointment. You're not the first. Don't sweat it. You can catch me Saturday and Sunday nights here on Salem News Channel with That Kevin Show at the same time, 9 p.m. Eastern. It's kind of convenient that way. We're going to move from the primary cycle and the court cases to a much bigger issue that both candidates should be talking about nearly every day as they are on the road, and yet only one of them seems to be. Maybe my next guest can identify why that is the case. When you look at numbers in which we are told inflation isn't a problem, the forecast seems to be telling us something else. Here to discuss is Ed Butowsky of Chapwood Investments. He's the managing partner there. And Ed, I appreciate your time. Last week, the commander-in-chief actually said that when he came into office, inflation was at 9%. and that he worked it down to a miraculous all-time low or something. I mean, I don't really ever really quite contextualize what Joe Biden is saying. But when it comes to where we are in this 3.5-year process, inflation is still worse for the average American than where we started when he came in, is it not?
Oh, without question. And what's interesting is really telling about this is that he did not come out and retract what he misspoke. Normally he'll come out and they'll clean it up. They didn't even clean this up at all. They just left it out there hoping that people would, buy off on the idea that when he came to office, it was 9%. That's just the media working in his favor. But you also have to remember with inflation, it's the cost of living increase, and it's not retroactive. Like if it went up to 9%, and then it's down to 3%, that doesn't mean prices came down 6%. That just means the rate of change slowed.
Rate of growth.
So
slowed,
you still have the cost of living increase up around 20%, since Biden took office, which is just not advantageous, especially for people who make middle income and lower income wage earners whose income is tied to the CPI. They're getting, their wages are not keeping up with the rising cost of living. So this is a real damaging, and this is why you have a lot of minorities that are starting to lean towards Trump in the upcoming election, because of the economy. It's always the economy that's the issue.
Well, and it's so, inflation is such a cancer because it bakes in at each level of the individual's, the consumer's life. So for the supply for the manufacturer, it goes up. For the manufacturer to pass that on to the place that sells whatever it is that they make, their costs are higher. They have to raise prices. By the time it gets to the consumer, it's had 4 or 5 pieces of inflation tacked on. And he's wondering why we're upset that eggs are, $8.50 a dozen, and that gasoline's running almost that much in California right now.
Yeah, and a lot of what the inflation number is, there's something that's called the M2, which is money supply. And if you look at the M2 goes up exactly in line with the CPI. So the more money that's printed is inflationary. So you can take a look at a chart and look at M2, and right next to it is inflation, and they mirror each other. So as we spend more money on the border and we spend more money by giving money to people overseas, we're printing that money because we don't have that money. So as long as we're printing that money, that it becomes inflationary, and that makes pork prices, as you can see here, go higher, and steak prices go higher, and every single thing that we do go higher. Today the PPI number was out, and it was a 0.5% higher than it was the month before. That is not a really good number. I mean, that's a 6% rise annualized. And that's not very good. And then we have the CPI number coming out tomorrow, which is probably going to be right in line with the PPI number. So, the CPI is the consumer price index, and the PPI is the producer price index. So it's called the wholesale price index is the PPI. And that's what, as you rightly stated, it gets leveraged to the CPI. So you're eventually going to have a much higher number with consumers. And with wages not matching up, it's a real disaster for the economy. And we do need the economy to grow, and the economy isn't growing. The economy grew at 1.6%, which is dismal. And in order to get the economy going, you have to lower interest rates. But if you were going to lower interest rates, that would then exacerbate inflation. So you have to raise interest rates, which is the complete opposite of what you need for the economy to grow. So you really have stagflation. That's really what Bidenomics has done for you.
Well, meanwhile, he's upset about how many M&Ms are in his package. So, but I want to point out something else, and it's important that you mentioned all of that, because it would be bad enough if it was just money policy. And if I remember correctly, Trump was trying to rein in the QE. In fact, I think they had a plan to take X number of dollars off the book and reel it back in at one point. Obviously, COVID changed a lot of things, and we started giving out checks to people. And that, I think, long-term set us up in a really bad situation. But it would be bad enough if it was just money policy. But when you add the attack on energy, which every company needs to be able to supply its company with what it needs to make its products or provide its services, and then the regulation piece of this, where you're literally putting a chokehold on companies where they have to hire bean counters to make sure that each of the regulations is signed off on, and those hires have nothing to do with the productivity of the company. Those costs also get rolled into the price of the good or product, and then the consumer's getting that. So you get the money policy, which is bad enough, and then you have these other two forms of essentially consumer taxation that's going into the experience, and it's a wonder we're able to afford anything, Ed.
Yeah, I wrote an article many years ago called Taxflation, and it has everything to do with rising taxes and the what's the word I'm looking for? Regulations that are taxing on the prices of every good and service. And it used to be insurance costs, were also tagged on, but every single thing that gets tagged on to a product ends up costing the consumer. And people don't realize that when you say, oh, it's okay to bring the migrants over and pay for them, well, that's additional cost that's coming out of everyone's pocket, because we print more money. That makes the dollars that you currently have
Ed
worth
Butowsky,
less.
I hate to cut you off, but the computer's going to cut me off. Thank you for your insights tonight. I'm very grateful. It's the Jenna Ellis Tonight broadcast on SNC. Stay right here.
Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com, and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now.
Welcome back. Final few minutes of Jenna Ellis Tonight on Salem News Channel. I'm Kevin McCullough. Very glad to have you with us. We've got a couple of things to end with tonight that I think, well, they're a little bit off the beaten trail of maybe what we would normally think of as hard news, but hopefully they make a point all the same. I want to start in the University of North Carolina region, where the board of directors there, board of trustees, has voted on a very important issue. The board of trustees voted to put funding for the school's diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI department. They did away with it. They just took it away. They said, we had money for you to pursue these things. We are now no longer giving you any money for those issues. And instead, get this, University of North Carolina is going to give the money to have campus police in place. Now, raise your hand if you think this is a great idea. Anybody that's seen those protests over the last number of weeks on college campuses know that the people that disagree with America tend to be rather violent, dangerous, foul-mouthed, smelly. They're not good examples of human beings. And in fact, they're kind of the equivalent of human garbage. But the one thing that has caused them a little bit stopping for pause is when they continued to take the American flag down and raise it on the campus of University of North Carolina. You saw very patriotic young men primarily come out of their classrooms and their dorm rooms and say, over our dead bodies. They took hold of the flag. They said, you will not take that down. We will make sure that it stays up. And then they did, until authorities showed up to break up the shenanigans. All that to say, you've got a group of people at the University of North Carolina, for whatever reason, it's not a particularly conservative school, that are starting to take this stuff very seriously. And so their board voted unanimously to take the $2.3 million that they had set aside for DEI And instead, they're going to send that to the university to be used for campus police in the new university budget. The move could essentially eliminate the school's diversity office. I don't know how it stays in business. You don't have any money for it. How are you going to pay anybody? The beefed up funding for campus police comes in wake of weeks of anti-Israel demonstrations on the campus, which have resulted in several arrests. Campus police can help with that. The UNC Board of Trustees voted unanimously to abolish the university's DEI standards and department and transfer all funds to the campus police. It's not 2020 anymore. Defund DEI and refund the police. I kind of dig that whole approach. What we've done to our police departments from one end of this country to the other is, in my mind, criminal, because they're the ones that wake up every morning and they put on that blue uniform and they say goodbye to their spouses and they kiss their kids and they head out, and who knows if they're ever going to step foot back into that same house at the end of the day. But we need to, while they are on the job and willing to risk their lives to keep us safe, we need to say to the world around them, we got your back. Joe Biden doesn't do that. His administration doesn't like police very much. That's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that the president seldom remembers where he is or who he's speaking to. You get past those two issues, I guess he doesn't really have a big problem. But those are significant. Beyond that, the respect for law enforcement is something that needs to be re-encouraged. And that's why this is National Police Week. And I'm glad that down in Washington, D.C. this week, you have officers coming from departments all across the country to stand by one another to support those who have lost their officer relatives in the last number of months. I have several friends that their dad and father and husband were a police officer, NYPD police officer, and they are there celebrating his memory. And that's the kind of thing we need to do. We need to take time out of our day to walk up to the average cop, pat him on the back and say, I really appreciate you being here. Because you are, this room, this block, this store is safer simply because you're here. And it's true. You can prove it. But now I want to move on to something else that may be a little more controversial. We've all heard of Taylor Swift. Don't roll your eyes. I saw that. But she's back. She's got a new album, 31 new songs, and she's even restarted the Eras Tour in Paris, in other parts of Europe. She's going to be coming to, I think it's New Orleans in the United States soon. And she's got a whole new section wholly devoted to the Tortured Poets Department, which is the name of the most recent album. Now, having said that, my bride and I have had a running joke for a number of years. She's a huge Swiftie. I like Taylor Swift. I don't have anything against Taylor Swift. I'm not like some talk show host that tries to be funny by saying she doesn't have any eggs left. That's none of my business. I like the girl. She's got a good story for women who persevere. And if my daughter, for instance, grows up wanting to be like her from that perspective, I don't have a problem with it. But nevertheless, I have teased my bride on occasion. I've given her a little ribbing. I said, she's so popular. It's almost like she can do no wrong. In fact, if you study the Bible, you've heard of this character called the Antichrist. In the book of Revelation, this particular person goes to a famous world capital, and when two people are killed in the middle of broad daylight, he heals them both and brings them back to life. We call the person that is doing that the Antichrist, and that is an amazing kind of parallel to what I was joking about Taylor's popularity. Now, she just had her 87th Eras Tour concert this week. 87 is the football number that her boyfriend wears on his jersey. There were 87 little Easter eggs to him in the show that she performed that night, including one of her outfits being the same color as his football uniform. But despite all of this, there's a new trend that I have teased my bride about. I said, if she is the Antichrist, at some point in time, people are going to start having church services for her, which I thought was completely absurd till I read this headline. A Taylor Swift service was held in a German church with the focus on religious convictions in her song. Now, to be very clear, Taylor Swift had nothing to do with this. These are just a bunch of locos that said, we're going to have a church service and call it a Taylor Swift service. But this is what happened. and had over 1,200 attendees, multiple guests that were brought to tears, because that's what Taylor Swift's music does. It brings you to tears. You remember a bad breakup, think of a bad time that you were going through in life, or maybe a song of hers helps you come out of a bad time and you're no longer in a bad time. But they had a complete Taylor Swift sing-along where a sound-alike was brought in to play her part, and a drummer and a bass player. Not much of a band beyond that. Having said that, let's be less like this church in Germany. Let's reserve churches for actual worship of the Almighty, who made us and still has a great plan for us. Sitting in for Jenna Ellis tonight, it's been my pleasure to be with you. I'm Kevin McCullough. Join me on Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for That Kevin Show, and I'll be back one more night this week. And for Jenna from New York, have a great night.